Good afternoon, and welcome to the News to Know webinar, Updates and Reminders. I'm Patty Harding, and I work with the School Meals Program. With me today is Stephanie Dross, and she works with the Summer Food Service Program. And also we have Jean Easley, and she also works in the School's Meals Program. So thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to join us for this webinar. And also I want to extend a thank you for your efforts in serving the students in your community a healthy meal in a safe manner. We truly appreciate all of your efforts in serving the students of your schools. So we call this updates and reminders. This webinar will be recorded. Certificates will be emailed to those that registered. And for today, if you have any questions, you will want to enter them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can click on that and then enter your question there. As time permits, we will respond to them. And so just enter them there. So recent communications. At the top of this screen, you'll see a picture where it shows an email notification. I just want to bring your attention that the emails I send out and Stephanie and Carrie send out come from the Iowa Department of Education. So just kind of familiar yourself with that. I sent one out on September 22nd. And it had these three memos that USDA had recently released. The first one being SP 24, and that was question and answers for the Child Nutrition Program during the school year 2021. So this memo covers mostly school reopenings, the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program, meal pattern questions, potable water, childcare, and after-school program questions. So if you have remained in NSLP and didn't transition to SFSP, you'll want to make sure that you review this memo if you haven't already done so. The next one is SP 25-2020. And that's question and answers to the nationwide waiver to allow the Summer Food Service Program. So this memo has question and answers that cover a variety of areas related to the implementation of the Summer Food Service Program. The last memo that was in that email is COVID-19 Child Nutrition Response number 57. And this provided guidance to the state agency in regards to pre-approval visits for new Summer Food Service Program sponsors. And it also did include some information on the recovery of reimbursement for new sponsors. So just to go a little bit further on that, this USDA memo applies to new first-time sponsors that met all of the SFSP requirements, which means the meal pattern and daily meal count, and served meals after the School Food Authority had a signed agreement, but before the SFA received written approval from the Bureau. So if you believe you're in that situation, you can go ahead and email me and we can confirm that that's the case. And then if this would apply, you'll complete a one-time exception and I will send that form then to you to complete. So if you have any questions, just email me about that last memo. The next email I sent out was sent on September 24th, and it really had two purposes. It had the food safety inspection report for last year, and then the announcement of this news to know. So it was sent on the 24th of September. The food safety inspection that I noted there is for last year, so for program 2019-2020. Many of you might have had a school closure take place in March and hadn't had the opportunity to record your food safety inspections. So if you're not sure if you did it or not, please go into Iowa CMP and check that you did do the food safety inspections. I'd like to have that section completed by October 14th. And I may have to hold the September claim and not have it be processed if this is not completed. I'm required to send a report to USDA. And so we just need to have everybody fill out your report so I can have a complete report to send to USDA. There were instructions in the email. So you can follow those, but if you have any problems, then go ahead and give me an email and I can help you out. The next memo that I'll be sending out this week, there'll be notice of the CACFP At-Risk Meal Program memo that USDA has put out. It's called COVID-19 Child Nutrition Response number 58. And it is a nationwide waiver of the area eligibility in the Child and Adult Care Food Program at-risk after-school care component. So what USDA has waived is now will allow schools, regardless of their location, to operate CACFP At-Risk Meal Program. It's going to be targeting children newly eligible for benefits due to the impact of COVID-19, which are the same requirements for implementing the summer food service program. And so this is another opportunity to see if a after-school care snack would help your community, your students. And I will be sending information out on this memo yet this week. So that's just an update on the memos I've sent out. Does anyone have any questions now? All right, Stephanie, I think you can go ahead and start SFSP.
Thank you, Patty, for all of the great information. So we're going to transition over to the summer food service program. And as Patty said, my name is Stephanie Dross, and I am the lead consultant with the summer food service program. And I'm excited to have all of you guys with us today and getting some ongoing exposure to the summer food service program, which is a terrific program that really helps support our community families. So I'm happy to have you guys with us today. As Patty had said, some communications had come out last week. One of those communications was also one that included some summer food service program reminders. And that was sent to all SFAs who had indicated that they were transitioning over to the summer food service program for the fall of 2020. And so what I wanted to do today was to go over some of the topic areas that were part of that reminder, trying to go a little bit more in detail than what that communication did. And hopefully this will alleviate some questions too that you may have had as you are going through this transition. I know that the regional school consultants have been working really closely with schools across the state. And so our goal too is that the reminders that came out and the topics today will help address some consistent questions that we seem to be getting. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about production records. Production records are not a requirement in the operation of the summer food service program. However, if you do not wish to use production records, you do have to take the step to write your planned portion sizes of all the menu items that are being served on your menu and maintain that as documentation that your menu does meet the meal pattern requirements. It is certainly a best practice to continue to use production records, as production records are a really valuable food service tool. They supply a wealth of information for forecasting products, purchasing foods, controlling waste, and identifying popular and not so popular menu items. And they do serve as a great communication tool between a food service manager and production staff. Formal production records that you use for NSLP are fine to continue to use in the summer food service program if you choose to. I have also included a snapshot of a weekly menu planner that can be used to document the meals that you serve. This menu planner helps to define the required component of each meal or snack and allows you to write in how you met those requirements. This basic menu planner template can be found in the SFSP resource folder, which we will talk about a little bit later. While operating the summer food service program during the fall of 2020, you can choose to use either the summer food service program or the National School Lunch Program meal pattern. The summer food meal pattern does not require you to use vegetable subgroups, have a maximum calorie, fat, or sodium levels, and there are no age grade groupings. Since only minimum requirements are listed in the SFSP meal pattern, you may serve older children larger portions or additional foods if you feel are needed. In the summer food service program meal pattern, however, all items served must be creditable to one of the 4 component groups, being milk, meat, a combined fruit vegetable group, and grain. Items that are not creditable cannot be purchased utilizing SFSP reimbursement dollars. Sponsors are really encouraged to use the program funds that you have to improve that meal by using more nutrient-dense items such as fresh fruits and vegetables, lean meats, whole grains, and unprocessed cheeses. The National School Lunch Meal Pattern is a more complex pattern and does require vegetable subgroups, calorie, saturated fat, and sodium maximums, and age grade groupings. So depending on how you've completed the meal pattern flexibility survey, you will be required to follow all of the regulations of the NSLP meal pattern if you choose this option on your SFSP application. Using this meal pattern does have its advantages, as it may reduce the need for training of staff and students, as it is a pattern they're familiar with. The meal pattern requirements around grain-based desserts are also a little different between the SFSP and the NSLP meal patterns. It is important to know that grain-based desserts that are listed with a footnote of 3 or 4 in the Exhibit A grain requirements chart are not considered creditable and therefore cannot be purchased using summer food service program funds for lunch. Grain-based desserts listed in the grain chart with a footnote of 3 are not creditable for summer food breakfast. And just to note the difference, the NSLP meal pattern, however, does allow for 2-ounce equivalent of grain-based dessert items per week. And I tried to note on this slide some of those items that are in those categories that would not be considered creditable. So we wanted to touch on offer versus serve, as so many schools are serving in their school sites in addition to doing grab and go service. The requirements of offer versus serve are different depending upon which meal pattern you have selected. In the National School Lunch Program, students are required to take 3 components at lunch or 3 items at breakfast, with one of those being a half a cup of fruit or vegetable. In the summer food service program, students are still required to take 3 components or items, but they are not required to take a fruit or vegetable to make a reimbursable meal. It is important to note, however, that fruit and vegetable servings fall within the same component group in the summer food service program meal pattern, so only one component can be counted even when both a fruit and vegetable serving are taken at lunch. You can review the summer food service program offer versus serve information that's found in the SFSP resource folder as well to see some additional information. When doing a unitized curbside grab and go meal, you are still allowed to do an offer versus serve. Children are allowed to decline one item. That item might be milk, if milk is served outside of that unitized box, or even a whole piece of fruit if maybe there's some fruit being offered as a side component. Please note, however, that all components of the meal must still be offered. It's just they do have an opportunity to decline one item in that curbside pickup. As there have been quite a few questions about offer versus serve with the summer pattern, I did want to take a closer look at it with everyone. So we're going to go over the specifics of both breakfast and lunch OVS. So for a reimbursable breakfast, there are 3 food components required: milk, a combined fruit vegetable group, and a grain serving. If a sponsor opts to utilize OVS at breakfast, a 4th different item must also be offered. That 4th item can be an additional serving of a fruit or vegetable, an additional serving of a grain, or it can be an added meat or meat alternate. Offering 2 servings of the same food item is not permissible under OVS in the summer food service program. All food items offered must be different from each other. A second piece of toast or having 2 choices of cereal is not considered as having a 4th item. Additionally, a larger food item that is worth 2 servings in weight, such as a large muffin, counts as only 1 food item under OVS in the summer food pattern, not 2. So there's a little bit of a difference between the SFSP requirements and the NSLP requirements. With offer versus serve, 4 different food items must be offered, and a child must take 3 of the 4 food items and may only decline 1 food item to be considered a reimbursable breakfast. A child may certainly choose all 4 items. So I included just a brief breakfast example on the slide. The breakfast menu being served is 8 ounces of low-fat milk, a half a cup of apple slices, 1 slice of whole wheat toast, and 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. The additional food item that's being offered is from the meat alternate component. A student must select at least 3 items of the breakfast to be considered reimbursable. Still, a student could select milk, the whole wheat toast, and apple slices to meet OVS. But there are some additional options that would also be reimbursable. A student might choose to take the toast, peanut butter, and milk, or the peanut butter, milk, and apple slices, all of which would be reimbursable as well. In lunch, 5 different food items must be offered with lunch or supper from the 4 food components. This includes a serving of milk, 2 different servings of fruit or vegetable to meet a 3/4 cup total, 1 serving of grain, and 1 serving of meat alternate or 2 ounces. Lunch or supper OVS requirements differ from breakfast in that a child must take at least 3 food components rather than items from the 5 food items that are offered. With that, a child may end up declining 1 or 2 items depending upon the food component that's declined. And as with breakfast, a child can choose to take all 5 of the items being offered. I said this on the earlier slide, but it's important to understand that the fruit and vegetable servings do fall within the same component group in the summer food service program. So only one component can be counted even when both a fruit and vegetable serving are taken. The student must still select 2 additional components, whether that be the milk, meat, and/or grain component. So the example on the slide is a lunch menu that's being served with 8 ounces of low-fat milk, 3/8 cup green beans, 3/8 cup orange slices, a 1-ounce dinner roll, and 2 ounces of grilled chicken. So if you remember, a student must select at least 3 components for the lunch meal to be considered reimbursable. So the student may select green beans, the whole wheat dinner roll, and grilled chicken and meet the OVS requirements, as food items were selected from at least 3 of the 4 component groups. But there's also a very large number of additional choices that would also be reimbursable. The student could choose milk, green beans, and a dinner roll, milk, green beans, and chicken, orange slices, a roll, and grilled chicken, plus many more. A student, however, would not be allowed to select green beans, orange slices, and grilled chicken, as only 2 component groups were selected, as the green beans and oranges are from the same component. Extra foods such as second entrees, extra milk, and a la carte foods can be sold in the summer food service program and should be charged to the student or household. These are not considered reimbursable items. Charges should cover the cost of the food item being sold. Schools may wish to use their electronic point of sale to enter these charges to each individual student account. If you are using the meal count sheets, please note that a second entree should not be marked on the space for second meals because it is not a full meal being served. We also wanted to touch on adult meals. The only meals that are considered reimbursable are meals served to children ages 18 or under. Program adult meals are meals served to kitchen staff who help prepare and serve the meal. These meals can be provided free of charge and are considered an allowable SFSP program expense. Non-program adult meals are meals served to other adults, such as a teacher or other building staff. These meals must be charged at a rate to cover all costs to prepare them. Both types of meals should be tracked, as you will need to report them in your monthly claim. Tracking may be done on the daily count sheets or in your point of sale. When operating an open site, all children 18 and under may eat for free, including preschool students and childcare children who come to the meal service site. When operating a closed enrolled site, only students enrolled in the district may participate. Students who attend a preschool who are enrolled in the district are eligible for free SFSP meals as part of that closed enrolled site. Current USDA guidance provides that child care centers may not pick up or receive delivery of bulk or multiple SFSP meals unless there is a vending agreement with the school. Meals vended to child care centers cannot be claimed under the SFSP. Please contact your regional consultant if you have any questions regarding this, as all of the scenarios may vary a little bit. We wanted to touch base a little bit on program integrity to promote and maintain the accountability and integrity of the USDA child nutrition programs. School food authorities are to implement procedures to ensure that meals are responsibly distributed to parents or guardians of eligible students and that duplicate meals are not distributed. One example of a procedure includes signage posted at meal distribution sites and communications sent home to families. A sign template has been included in the SFSP resource folder. In SFSP, students are allowed to receive up to 2 meals, except for lunch and supper, or 1 meal and 1 snack per day. All schools and summer sponsors are required to monitor the operation of their summer food service program. This includes a couple of monitoring steps. The first monitoring step is called the pre-operational visit. Sponsors are required to complete pre-operational visits for new non-school site locations and those sites that have experienced problems in previous years of operation. Note that I did say non-school sites. We certainly recognize that a school site has the ability to provide a meal service, as this is something that they would regularly have done to operate the National School Lunch Program. So the pre-operational visit is really looking at non-traditional sites operating away from a school location. You will log the date of the pre-operational site visit on your site application. These visits are required in order to determine that the site has the facilities to provide meal service for the anticipated number of children in attendance and the capability to conduct the proposed meal service. Sponsors are not required to make pre-operational visits at school sites that are used during the school year. The site review is a requirement for all of the sites being sponsored by the schools and summer food service sponsors. Sponsors must conduct a review of each site at least once during the first 4 weeks of program operations. During this transition from the 1920 to the 2021 program year, the first month of operation would be considered October. While program monitoring is essential to ensure the overall integrity of the operations, programs can be conducted off-site through a desk audit. So as related to concerns around the pandemic, USDA did provide that as a flexibility. So if you don't have the capability to go off-site, you can conduct that monitoring step in that off-site capacity. Through documents submitted to you or phone conversations with site staff at those locations. As I said, you could review records that have been mailed, faxed, or emailed by site staff. We did want to touch on meal counting. Having an accurate count of meals served is a critical component of the operation of a summer meal site, as a sponsor's meal count is what drives their level of reimbursement. Program operators are required to maintain accurate meal counts for the submission of claims. Taking a meal count at the point of service is the most accurate method. This means that meals are counted as they are given to students or parents and marked on the meal count sheet. This process ensures that the child has selected a fully reimbursable meal and that child meals and adult meals are recorded separately on the meal count form. This process also helps to ensure that any second meals served are not included with the first meal counts. The mode of how you choose to distribute meals will define how best to tally your meal count forms. And on this slide, you'll see that we have several examples for you to look at. During the distribution of non-congregate meals, this means that meals are counted as they are provided to a family at curbside, at a bus stop, or delivered to the home. A sponsor may not collect a meal count via a tray or meal sack count or an entree count. It does have to be counted at the point that it is served to that child or that parent or guardian. And it is something that can be done utilizing your school district's electronic point of service system. So the meal count form on the left, that is the standard USDA meal count form that's in their administrative guidance manual. There are options to flip the form over to get to a higher count. But in recognizing the school operations, there was a kind of a large quantity meal count form created That's the one in the center, which allows you to go to a higher tally count using this paper form. And then Michigan had developed this nice sheet for multiple meal distribution. So that's something like if you were doing meals for virtual learners and maybe you were providing 3 meals or a week's worth of meals at one distribution point, the multiple meals form is also something that could be utilized. There are a couple of civil rights requirements associated with the summer food service program. Sponsors are required to collect and report information about the ethnicity and racial identity of participants served by their program for each site under the sponsorship. The sponsor must count the participating children at least once during that first month of operation. And so with this fall service, we're really looking at October under that program year 2021. To help provide flexibility and ensure data quality, separate categories must be used when collecting and reporting race and ethnicity. Ethnicity must be collected first and really asks if the applicant or participant is Hispanic or Latino or non-Hispanic or not of Latino origin. Racial designations include the following options: American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian, Black, or African American, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, or white. The sponsor may use visual identification to determine a participant's ethnicity and race, such as if you're trying to collect the participation count at an open site, because you might have a combination of children enrolled in your district as well as other community children. If you're operating as a closed site, program information on race and ethnicity can be collected using data that you already have in your school's student database. You just want to document it. Another civil rights step is the issuing of a media release. The intent of the media release is to announce the availability of free meals, the non-discrimination policy, and the procedure for filing a complaint. Sponsors can also use the media release to add other relevant information about their program operations as they see fit. Sponsors need to issue it to the media regardless of whether they're operating as open or closed sites. Your responsibility is providing it to the local media, perhaps the local newspaper, radio station, TV station, etc. But this is not something that you are required to pay for to be published. Your due diligence is the provision of that media release to your local media. And hopefully it's something that might generate some interest in your operation. So you might be showcased in an article on your local paper about the good works that you're doing. And I just wanted to point out that we did place a new template for a media release in the SFSP resource folder at the end of last week. We tried to modify the media release to make it a little more relevant to the fall's operation. So if you haven't had a chance to go look recently, you might want to check that out. In addition to providing information to the media, it's also important to communicate with your families. You can utilize many different avenues to communicate about your summer meal program, whether it be social media, your school website, perhaps it's using the email or text alert system that you have, or perhaps you have electronic signage out in front of the school, or maybe you just want to post some flyers around the school or the community, and or put something in like a Friday backpack or a virtual backpack. And there's a couple of examples on this screen. One was locally created by Urbandale Community School District. The other was something that No Kid Hungry had put together. And we've been getting quite a few questions about the application process. The summer food service program year is one that actually more aligns with the federal fiscal year. So it runs from October to September each year. And in a normal summer, that would cover that full summer season, because the regular summer season tends to operate from late May into mid-August. However, with the flexibilities that were provided to utilize summer food during this fall of 2020, the operation of the summer food service program is really crossing over 2 program years, which is requiring all of our schools and community organizations to complete 2 application packets. The first application packet is kind of an extension of what a lot of you already had completed, which is the 1920 SFSP application, and that involves pulling the month of September and updating those operational dates. If you're a new sponsor, it means starting a new application packet for that first month of fall operations. But then operations from October through December 30th, which is the time frame that summer food has been extended to, does require then a completion of an application in the 2021 program year. We are currently delaying the opening of the program year 2021 packets to allow our program sponsors to get those 1920 packets updated, and our bureau consultants the time to get them approved. In doing this, it helps us to ensure that the maximum amount of information will roll forward from the 1920 packets into the 2021 packets, hopefully simplifying the process for everyone in the completion of that 2021 packet. We will make an announcement just as soon as possible regarding the official date of the opening of that new application packet. So stay tuned. I've kind of been mentioning along the way throughout the slides that we have an SFSP resource folder. Here it is in Google. So here's kind of a snapshot of that Google folder, but we have a multitude of different resources there for you. Some of them are the official forms and documents that you need. Some of them are resources and template documents that you could utilize. So if you haven't had a chance to go look into that resource folder, please do so. We encourage you to take a look at what resources we've put out there for you. I did want to highlight the Iowa School Nutrition email group. If this is something that you haven't yet gotten involved with, it might be something you want to take a look at. It's a great avenue to connect the different school nutrition directors together across the state, giving you the opportunity to ask questions of your peers and have an interaction on maybe some best practices, or share some resources you've come across, or someone can share resources with you, or just a place to ask questions and try to get some additional answers. If this is something that you have not yet gotten involved with, you want to send an email to Carrie Scheidel, and she will help get you set up so you can also be participating in that resource. And then I also wanted to let you know that today's webinar is part of a series of webinars called News to Know. They are scheduled on a monthly basis. The topic areas have not been defined yet, but more information will be coming out. But if you would want to put a placeholder on your calendar, here are the dates that are currently scheduled for that series of webinars. And this is just going to be a really good place, good opportunity to get some updated information about what's happening with the child nutrition program. So these would be great to get added to your calendar going forward. That was the information that I had to present on Summer Food Service Program. Hopefully had an opportunity to hit on some of the areas that maybe you had some questions on, or highlight some action steps needed for the upcoming months around summer food. If you have any questions, and I think I see that the Q&A box has picked up a few questions, now is your opportunity to add that into the Q&A box. It can be something about summer food, or it can be a question back to Patty Harding about the topic she covered at the very beginning, but we'll do our best to try to answer questions you have right now.
Okay, very good. Stephanie, we do have a number of meal pattern, dessert, and a la carte type questions. And I don't know if you want to read them, or shall I read them to you?
I can open up the Q&A box. So if none of these have been answered yet, I can just start at the top. How's that?
Yeah.
And you and or Patty can help chime in if I don't know the answer. And if we don't know the answers, we're going to take these questions back and try to get some more detailed answers for them.
They're actually really good meal pattern, dessert type questions that we get quite often. So I think these are all really good to answer live.
Okay, perfect. So as I'm looking at the questions, the first question that came in says, our school provides lunches for our local daycare. They are run under CACFP, which is the Child and Adult Care Food Program. But if we have preschoolers that would eat lunch there rather than at school, would their meals be free? The daycare question is kind of a complex question because it depends on whether your site operation is, if your site program is operating as a closed site or an open site. Open sites have more opportunity to feed children outside of that district or school's enrollment. But we do need to kind of get some additional information from you as to whether or not the meals are served on site or if they're sent off site. So Joanne, if you would send me that question via email, I might have some additional questions I'd like to ask you to let you know whether or not that is something that can be done or not. The intention of the summer food service program is really to feed an individual child and not an organization. And so we have to be really careful when you already have agreements in place as to whether or not that is allowable. Most typically, when operating an open site, if the children are on site, when operating an open site and the children are at your site location to consume a meal, that would be acceptable because in a summer open site, all meals served to children 18 and under are allowed. If you are operating as a closed site, it's going to be dependent upon whether the children in that program or in that preschool are considered enrolled in your school district. And whether they're on site or off site as to whether it would be acceptable. So any questions about daycare and CACFP are probably best answered individually. So you can email me or you can email your regional school consultant as well. We have a question that came in and said, we use donuts, cereal bars, and whole grain Pop-Tarts from March through June. Why can't we still use them? There is more of an allowance at breakfast to do some of the sweet grains. So if you're referring to breakfast, those might certainly be allowable in that operation of a breakfast program. Where we saw more concerns during review process over the summer was some of the sweet grains that were being included in the lunch service. Because in the lunch service, really the only sweet grains that are allowed are more like a graham cracker or an animal cracker, but things like brownies, cookies, those types of sweet grains are not allowed. A question came in that said, chips, if I sell non-whole grain chips on my a la carte, can I still get them if I put them under a la carte? So if I'm understanding the question correctly, you're asking about selling a la carte in the summer food service program. And in summer food, there are not any nutrient standards around the service of an a la carte item. Your requirement is really going to be ensuring that you're covering the cost of that item that you're selling. If you're trying to provide chips as part of your reimbursable meal program, there are some chips that are considered creditable. Those chips would be along the lines of Sun Chips, pretzels, Doritos, corn chips. The ones that most typically aren't creditable as part of a meal pattern would be potato chips. So then the question came in, a whole grain sun chip is not allowed. Nope, a whole grain sun chip would be allowed. It is considered a creditable grain in the summer food service program. And then I have a question about cinnamon rolls on our menu for breakfast. A cinnamon roll isn't allowed sweet grain in breakfast. It's just not allowed in the lunch meal pattern. So you can serve cinnamon rolls as part of your breakfast program and you would be fine. A question came in that asked if you make breakfast sandwiches that might consist of a biscuit, egg patty, sausage patty. Would that be considered only one item or two? That's a great question. That would actually be considered 2 item because your biscuit will contribute to the requirement of 1 serving of grain. The egg patty and sausage actually meet the requirement of that additional 4th item, which can be a meat. But the egg patty and sausage are really considered a single item. If you think about the breakfast meal pattern, meat alternate is not a required component. So adding an additional serving of meat or meat alternate meets that requirement of going from 3 to 4 items. And so your breakfast sandwich could count as 2, a grain and a meat. So then a student would just have to take a fruit, vegetable, and or milk to be considered reimbursable under OVS. A question came in about whether or not you can use apple and cherry fruital. The answer to that is you may use it if it's planned in a breakfast meal service, but not as part of the lunch meal service. All really good questions, you guys. And Jean and Patty, if you want to add anything onto here, please feel free to chime in at any point. We got a question about if you're using a point of sale system for the count, do you have to use the meal count forms too? The answer is no. You do not have to do both. That would be duplicating your time and effort. Your requirement is to collect a point of service meal count. And so if you have buttons programmed into your point of sale right now to help account for your service of your SFSP breakfast and lunch, you do not have to do a tally count form. So we have another meal pattern question about the SFSP lunch requirements. If my menu says grilled chicken sandwich with a whole grain bun, green beans, baked beans, fresh fruit, and milk, does that meet the requirements, or do I need to add an additional item that isn't a fruit or vegetable? In looking at your meal that you've described, your meal does meet the meal pattern requirements. Depending on your portion sizes for green beans, baked beans, and fruit, you have at least met the 3/4 cup requirement, it would appear, if you were doing a 1/4 cup of each and you met the requirement to have at least 2 servings. You've met your 2-ounce meat alternate with your grilled chicken sandwich, and most likely your serving of grain with your bun, and then your milk. So you've met the 4 component requirements. where you want to be careful in is when a student, if you're doing offer versus serve, what is that student selecting from those multiple requirements? Because in lunch, they have to select at least 3 of the component groups. And because you have 3 servings out of that combined fruit and vegetable group, whether they take 1 of those servings or 3, they've only met 1 component group. So they would still need to select items from 2 of the other components, whether it would be meat, grain, and or milk. We have, let's see, a question about a sandwich. Does a sandwich count as 2 items, meat and bun? Is the sandwich something that's being served at breakfast or lunch, I guess is a question that I have. If it's a breakfast sandwich, it would count as 2 items. So remember, at breakfast, you must have 4 items available from at least the 3 required component groups plus a 4th additional. So the meat that might be part of a breakfast sandwich would be part of that 4th additional. So you'd be meeting 2 items by having a serving of meat and a serving of grain. The same would go for lunch. Lunch, you're required to have at least 3 of the 4 food components. So at lunch, you would be meeting the requirement of 2 food components because you have a meat alternate and a grain bread serving. So a question came in about monitoring. Is the pre-operational visit required if we are a returning site from the spring operation of the SFSP? And then the same question about the site review. So a pre-operational visit is only required of new site locations or sites that had operational concerns. And so if this site operated in the spring, it would not be considered new any longer. So as long as you had, some consistent, you weren't concerned about the operation of that site location from spring, you would not be required to do a pre-operational visit this fall. The site review is an annual requirement for all sites. So as we transition from the 1920 to the 2021 program year, a site review would be required for all of the sites that you're sponsoring for operations going forward this fall. Because 2021 really starts in October, we're looking at that requirement being an October requirement. There is the simplified site review form, which took the standard site review and tried to make it a little bit less complex and make it something that could be done as an off-site review. But that is required for all sites this fall. So a question came in. So under SFSP, all students have to take milk for breakfast and lunch. Is that correct? No, milk is not a required item that has to be selected if you're doing offer versus serve. If you've said that you're not doing offer versus serve, and it's something that is serve only, then yes, all students would have to take milk for breakfast or lunch. But if you have opted to do offer versus serve, then milk is not required. It can count towards one of the 3 items at breakfast or one of the 3 components at lunch, but it's not required. A question about apple crisp. Is apple crisp not allowed? Apple crisp would be considered a sweet grain, so is not allowed in SFSP. The SFSP meal pattern, with it being a much more basic meal pattern as compared to the more complex National School Lunch Meal Pattern, a few years ago came out with the rules around sweet grains, really trying to emphasize utilization of your program dollars to enhance the quality and the nutrient content of what you serve. And in doing that, what you're really looking to try to enhance are things that maybe your students don't get at home. So we really want you to focus some of those dollars on trying to provide them maybe some fresh produce, or a higher quality cheese on their sandwich, or some whole grains in that menu plan. And so apple crisp would be considered a sweet grain, and so that's not something that we want to see on those SFSP meal patterns. Okay, I'm scrolling up through my Q&A box because it's filling up on the bottom. It's pushing it here. There's a question that came in that said, can we still do a dessert for a special meal, such as Halloween or Thanksgiving? I'm not sure the best way to answer that. We certainly recognize wanting to celebrate the holidays and do something fun with your students. I would encourage you to look at, is there a non-food way to celebrate those holidays with your students? Or is there something available that might be creditable that you could include in that meal pattern? One of the items that a lot of times I do see in the summer operation are some of those like frozen fruit cups or frozen fruit sherbets that are made with like 100% juice. So for Halloween, instead of doing a dessert, can you incorporate one of those frozen sherbet cups, like with orange, or if there's a vendor out there that has some holiday festive ones available to you, is there a different way that you can celebrate? I don't think any of us are going to come in and give you a really hard time about an occasional sweet grain, as long as it's not served regularly on the menu. You really need to work as hard as you can to keep those sweet grains off the menu to provide that healthier meal plan. And you do have an option. The rule around this is that it's your program reimbursement that can't be utilized to purchase those sweet grain items. And so you have other non-program revenues coming into your operation, whether that be this from the sale of a la carte, adult meals, or catering. You can utilize those non-program dollars to purchase something special that you would like to serve as part of that Halloween or Thanksgiving meal. You just want to make sure that your records reflect that you do have those other financial resources to help cover that. So a question came in about use of whole grain Pop-Tarts, Nutri-Grain bars at breakfast, if that was okay. And yes, that is okay. But cookies are not allowed under SFSP for lunch. That's correct. If you're utilizing your program dollars, you can't use your summer reimbursement to purchase items like cookies. We have a question that came in about the claim. Our August claim was filed under the NSLP, but the reimbursement was coded as SFSP. When we inquired, we were told that the claims would all be SFSP until the funds run out. If this is the case, do we code all of the August expenses to the SFSP as well, and then continue until we are no longer under the SFSP? There was a school business alert article that was issued in June this year that talks about program coding, expense coding. The money that we are currently utilizing for reimbursement for all of the child nutrition programs is CARES grant dollars. It's being utilized for National School Lunch Program, for Child and Adult Care Food Program, as well as the Summer Food Service Program. It's coming in under its own program code as CARES grant funding. So I would recommend that you go look at that school business alert article. And if you want to send me an email about it, I can help direct you to that article, because it does kind of clearly talk about how to best code your expenses. And I see on the clock that we've hit 3 o'clock. I know we have a few more questions, and I'm happy to stay on continuing to answer questions, but certainly want to be respectful of everyone's time. Patty and Jean and I certainly appreciate your attendance at today's webinar. Our contact information is on the slide if you want to reach out to us with an individual question, and or you may reach out to your regional school consultant with questions as well. We're here to support you. We want to help make this transition as easy as possible. But please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Like I said, I'm okay continuing to answer questions. I just wanted to be respectful of everybody's time. So a question has come in about the service of grab-and-go meals, and if we're sending a lunch for today and a breakfast for tomorrow, would that breakfast go on today's tally sheet or tomorrow's? You know, I've had a lot of conversations with people about this over the course of this summer. The most important part of this question is that whichever direction you choose to do, that you're consistent, and that's how you do it throughout the course of your service. Technically, if you're looking at the meal that you're providing, you would include the lunch for today on today, September 28th, and would log the breakfast as a September 29th breakfast meal. You could utilize a single daily tally sheet. On that tally sheet, you'd want to note today's date and the meals being served for. And then our recommendation is always, when you have multiple sites, if you're not doing a point of service, an electronic point of service count, that you would do a consolidation count to help prepare for that claim. And in your SFSP resource folder, you will find there is a template for a consolidation. And so you could take that today's single tally count, note, let's say you served 100 meals, note 100 lunch meals on the consolidation form, and 100 breakfast meals then for September 29th on that consolidation form. But whatever process you use, we just want you to be consistent, so you do it the same throughout your whole process of consolidating those meal counts in preparation for the claim. A question came in about the point of service. I do not have specific buttons for the summer meal program on my POS system. I removed the price of breakfast and lunch, so the POS gives me a total number of breakfast and lunch at the end of the day. Is that okay? I believe that would be a fine process to take. I have heard others do a similar. So it can be just removing that student charge from a button that you already have in your system. That's a reimbursable meal button. It could also be the addition of new buttons that specifically reflect SFSP breakfast and lunch with a zero charge. I've heard people go both directions with it, and either one would work. Questions about breakfast. Can we do whole grain granola bars or Nutri-Grain bars? Yes, those are allowable at breakfast. A question about apple crisp or ice cream treats for lunch under SFSP. Those would both be non-creditable items. The apple crisp would be a sweet grain, and ice cream actually doesn't credit towards any of the component groups. If you were to offer those items, those would have to be purchased with non-reimbursement, non-program dollars? A question was coming in about changing our students to free during the SFSP period or until December 31st to make it easier for our food service workers to enter the student meals at the time. And then once summer program transitions over to NSLP, change them back. Patty, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this. My recommendation would not be to change your student status, that you really need to leave that in the system as it was determined based on that free and reduced application. In lieu of doing that, you could create a button in your point of service that just reflects a zero charge whether the students are paid free or reduced. So none of them would get charged for that meal. I don't know, Patty, if you want to weigh in on that one.
I would agree with what you said, that it'd be best not to change the status in their point of sale system, because that will cause more issues, I believe, later on in the spring when you'd have to, or in January when you'd have to change back to school lunch. So yeah, it'd probably be best not to change their status if that's the question that they were asking.
That's how I interpreted it.
Right.
And you can reach out to us individually after the webinar if you want to talk more about that. Okay, I'm trying to look and see if there was any other questions. And, you know, I want to recognize with everyone, I know there's been a lot of questions about the sweet grains. And I know that we all like to incorporate those into our menu because it's a student favorite. It's a good draw on our menus. You know, I would encourage you just to look at what other really good, healthy, nutritious items are out there that are also student favorites that might draw them in. I know that, you know, while it's accessible, that there are a lot of wonderful varieties of fruits and vegetables that you can incorporate. I shouldn't say vegetables, lots of really yummy sweet fruits, a lot of variety that you could incorporate into the menus that will draw your students in that they really like, and additional entree items that they really respond to, and try to use those favorites to bring the students in and not necessarily rely on those sweet items. You know, our goal is to give them the highest quality meal that we can. And we really want to focus that on some really nutrient dense items. So, you know, work with your vendors to see what's out there that can incorporate some nice variety that the students will be responsive to as well. And use those sweet grains as that occasional treat for special occasions, knowing that you might have some of those non-program dollars available to you to help support that. So a question came in about breakfast. If we offer 2 pieces of toast at breakfast along with canned or fresh fruit, juice and milk, is this acceptable in SFSP? So the challenge with that offering is that the 2 pieces of toast are really considered the same item. It's just 2 of the same item. And OVS in the summer food program is really wanting you to put different choices out than 2 of the same item, whether it's 2 pieces of toast or 2 different types of cereal bowls. They're still kind of looked at as the same item. But if you offered toast and a choice of cereal with your fruit and juice and milk, then you're actually putting in 2 different options for your grain. And then I'm also looking canned or fresh fruit. You are offering already 2 choices of fruit by offering a canned or fresh, as long as they're not the same. So don't do like a fresh orange and mandarin oranges, or fresh oranges and orange juice, because those are kind of considered the same thing. But by offering choices of fruit, you have offered that additional fruit serving. So you have met. So technically you could do 2 pieces of toast if you had 2 different choices of fruit and or fruit juice and your milk, because you would have 4 different items available. I had to talk through that one, sorry.
Stephanie,
Yes.
this is Patty Harding. It looks like we had a question come in at 2:52 about offer versus serve at breakfast in the middle and high school, and then do a pre-bagged breakfast with the choice of taking a milk or not at the elementary.
Oh, okay. Yep. Let me scroll back up. I think I missed that one. Thank you, Patty. So the question is, can you do, oh, yes, at breakfast and then do a pre-bagged. So you actually get to decide how you're going to provide your program operation based on that site level. So your elementary can look different than your middle or high school. So if you're wanting to do a more of a unitized, maybe you have more of a grab and go breakfast at the elementary school. As long as you have 3 items available in that pre-bagged breakfast with milk as an option, let's say outside of the bag, you could allow those elementary students to decline the milk as part of OVS and take the 3 items that are in the bag. But if you're allowing them to decline the milk, you have to make sure you have 4 different items available through that unitized grab and go service. Hopefully that makes sense. There is a question about whether or not you can serve bagged popcorn. Popcorn is considered a creditable item. You want to make sure that you're serving a large enough portion so that it does credit, because it does take a decent size to credit. I would have to look up what that serving size is because I don't know that off the top of my head, but popcorn is creditable if it's in the right proportion or the right size. I think I got through the questions. If anyone has anything else, please feel free to go and add them into the Q&A, or like I said, you're welcome to email me or Patty or your regional consultant, and we'll work through the questions that you have with you directly. Again, I'd like to thank you for your time today. I'm very excited to have you operating the summer food service program. Want to make sure you're comfortable with it. And I know Patty was wanting to share some of the most recent guidance and Q&As that are out there. So we appreciate you joining in with us today, and hope you will get registered to participate in the next one once that information comes out. Patty, anything else?
No, I have no other additional comments.
All right. Well, I hope everyone